And we are 10 minutes away from today's study group. We are in our pre-show right now. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Live stream is open and available. We have folks in the chat. We've got video that's working. I guess I can pause that. This is the 10 minutes prior to getting started. You can see we're at 11:50 local time. And I am just doing my last minute checks. We have recordings going down here. You can see the Cylons on the bottom right here going back and forth. They are recording our audio and video for me. There's actually two of them. You can't see the one just above that one. There's two units, both getting video and audio of this event. We're also streaming live to the YouTube, and that is also being recorded, so you can see it immediately afterwards. We've got all of our video up and running. This is my usual check. Those four boxes in the middle are the important ones. There's me. Hi, it's me. We've got the view you're seeing currently, which is my bird cam. We have the other view of what's in front of me. See, it matches. And then the last view here, that fourth one, is the laptop, the MacBook Pro that I have to my right that shows the presentation. So I can switch between all of those and be able to show them to you. So the video looks good. Audio, I'm looking at the audio. It's hard to see the audio display, but you can sort of see it here in the corner that I do get some views of the audio, both in a waveform, and I could see there's an audio bits analysis that is occurring on here across all of those different ranges. And there's a whole bunch of codes that come up that let me know either it's working or it's not working. So we're in good shape. Today is the 2/20/11/02, the Core 2 study group. We were supposed to do this Core 2 study group last week for those of you. Some of you even showed up last week and said, where is everybody? What happened? What happened to the live stream? Well, we had this hurricane come through Wednesday evening, Thursday morning. So at 3 in the morning on Thursday, or was it Wednesday? 3 in the morning. Yeah, it was Wednesday, or I guess Thursday morning. Wednesday night, Thursday morning, hurricane came through. We lost power, as one does in a hurricane. It's sort of expected. We all know that's going to happen. It's a normal part of living in Florida. The hurricane came through, and then at that point, you just assume that it's going to take days to get your power back. I had already planned on being without power for quite some time, and that's why the weekend before, or maybe Monday, whenever it was, I adjusted this to be a week later. I just figured, well, Thursday's not going to work. That's the day after a hurricane. Let's do it on the next Thursday. So we pushed it to today, right now. We're live right now. Interestingly enough, funny story. Thursday came. I woke up, no power. Again, we're in Florida, so we have some instant coffee stuck aside for situations just like this, and a gas stove that we can manually light. So we can get the stove going. We heated up some water. We boiled some water. We made some instant coffee. We actually went out of the house just to look around the neighborhood, see what trees were still up. And we had very, very little damage where I happen to live here in Orlando. And by the time we got back to the house, the power was back on. I could have technically, both power and internet were up. I could have technically done the study group on Thursday last week, but I just didn't realize that we'd be so fortunate. And we were super lucky, because some people, it took days. And that's what you would normally expect with something like that. So that's why whenever we plan these things, I always tell you the dates and times can change a bit, because you never know when a hurricane's coming through. So that's my story of why we're here today. Normally, I don't do these back to back. For those of you that were here yesterday, we did a Network Plus study group. And so today we're sort of going backwards and doing, not backwards, but normally I do the Core 2 study groups before the Network Plus study group during the month. But obviously we pushed that a little bit. So here we are. That was the story. That was the story of the hurricane that was not to be. Fortunately, where I happened to be, it was, now we can say it was a non-event. It was obviously an event. There was lots of wind and lots of rain, and power outages and that type of thing. But you just never know. So it just made sense to push it. And that way we didn't have to worry about it. I had already written the content. I already had the presentation ready. We already had the questions done, but we just needed to push it. We just needed to push it a week, and that turned out to be okay. Just fine. So folks, if you are here, you're welcome to check in with us. We do have our map up at professormesser.com/QA. Let's see if I can show that to you. Will put me on the screen. There you go. That's what this will normally look like during the live stream. And you can see on the screen, we can see where people are checking in from, either in the US. We got some Canadians up there that are in Hamilton area hanging out. You've got folks over on the West Coast of the United States. And that's a good place where we can just sort of see where everybody's checking in from. Got some folks there in the islands checking in. We're all watching that latest storm, right? Can we look at spaghetti models real quick? Maybe we can do that. SpaghettiModels.com. That's the Mike's weather page. So we're all, speaking of folks in the Caribbean, the Leeward Islands, all of these along the way. And you can kind of see where the track is for the next storm. This is all when you watch this on the replay, none of this will make any sense. None of this will be important. But that is certainly what we are watching here. I like this, that it's going past us. However, I thought that with the last storm as well, which went all the way to Mexico and then decided, hey, we got cousins in Florida. Let's go see them. And it sure did. Right now, not much intensity being predicted for that particular storm. But then again, it's not hitting anything yet. There's always opportunity for the storm to get worse, as very, very clear in the last week when it just barreled straight for us. It really was one of those where they said, like a week before, oh, it's totally going to your house. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's a week. How are you supposed to predict it? Nope, went straight to my house. It went right over the house. So that's how it goes. Oh, we got a lot to go through today. It's all Core 2 today. We've got a lot to step through. We got about 2.5 minutes to go, and we will make all of this work. You know, one of the things that I've been working on here is more content with A+ and other things. And so we're still working on some of those things, but it's one of those opportunities when you have a storm come through, you can kind of, without power, sit back and think about how things are going and what you're planning. And that's what we did. And we were very lucky, very thankful that all I had to do was kind of clean up outside. But fortunately, didn't really amount to any damage. We can you grab a broom, you pick up some limbs, and you're okay. That's how we like them. Don't need anything more than that. Okay, let's see what else we can get ready. We got about a minute and a half. We're looking good here. Recordings are good. I've already done the podcast intro. Really, that's it. You kind of miss all the fun before I go live, which is me saying a script. This is sort of my world. The fun part happens once we kind of get going in the next minute and do some live real world questions and see how well we know this content for Core 2. So if you're here for Core 2, fantastic. If you're planning to take Core 2 eventually, this is where you should be. If you've already taken Core 2, this can be a nice thing to sit in because I will give you at some point a continuing education credit. There's Malk. Hey, Malk, thanks for 2 days in a row. How lucky are we? Thank you for being here. And I hope things are fine in St. Vincent. That's one of the things I'm always thinking about, because now I've met people in so many different places in the world. Now when things are happening, I'm thinking back to what's happening for them. What are they going through at that particular point? Kind of brings us a little closer. I love the internet in that way. It just shrinks everything down so that we can be right next to each other. We can be neighbors, and yet we're halfway across the world, which I think is kind of cool. None of this would work without that. Let's see if I can, speaking of work, get this all set up. I think I can. Okay, we got graphic. We're about to hit the top of the hour. I like to watch it go to 12. Let's see it go to 12, and there we go. 12 noon Eastern Time. That means I can start my keynote. I can look for a green light. That looks so good. And now we're ready for a live stream, everybody. Why don't we do that? Hello, everyone. Welcome to the October 2024 Professor Messer 220-1102 Core 2 A+ study group. This is the study group where I ask you questions that come directly from the official CompTIA exam objectives, and you get to tell me how much you know of those particular topics. We have a lot to go through today, and if you are here joining us live, we would love it if you participated with us by popping open a new browser window and heading over to professormesser.com/QA. That is the link that will take you to the questions and the answers, eventually the answers at least, where you can try your knowledge, test your knowledge, and see how much you really know of these different topics. I have a question, in fact, that we can start with that I call my rewind question. The rewind question is one that, in fact, I have the wrong rewind question on my screen. I wonder if I even have the right script of things in my presentation. I'm going to very quickly, this is what we get for the whole pre-show. I set up and got everything ready to go, and we were looking at what we were trying to work through. Yep, I just have the wrong thing in the wrong place. Let's move it back. Let's put this over here. It's live, people. This is how we do it. We can fix things on the fly. It all works out a little bit better. We call this a rewind question because this is a question that we did last month, but I want to see if you remember what the answer was. The question asks, a technician is working with the ext4 file system. Which of the following would best describe this system? Would it be Android phone, flash drive, Windows Server, Mac OS SSD, or Windows 11 Pro? Now, the way that we do this is that if you are indeed watching this live, you can join us and answer the questions in real time by using the link on your screen. And in fact, we invite you to do that. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. Please do not put answers in the chat room. Please don't put hints in the chat room. Instead, use that link on your screen, and that will be the one that we like to do. This is the important part of this, is being able to understand what these different file systems might do. And we are going to come back to this question in just a bit and see if you happen to remember what this is, and we'll reveal what the answer is in just a moment. I'll remind you that sometime in the first hour of this live stream, we will be providing you with instructions and super secret code words that will allow you to get 1 hour of a continuing education unit. If you don't know what a CEU, a continuing education unit, is, then this probably won't apply to you. But if you are using CEUs to renew your certification, it's a great way to do that. So we'll talk about CEUs in a bit. Just keep your ears open sometime in this first hour, and we will talk more about the details along those lines. I'll also let you know that we're going to talk today all about the 220-1102 exam. This is the latest version of the CompTIA A+ exam. It was released on April the 20th of 2022, and we expect that it will probably retire somewhere around November of 2025. So as we sit here in October of 2024, you've got over a year before we would expect this particular exam version to be retired. That means if you are studying right now for the A+, or you're considering studying for the A+ here in October of 2024, this is the right version. This is the version you should be going through it. On average, it usually takes folks about 2 to 3 months for each of these exams. So 2 to 3 months, you can certainly get through that before November of 2025. The exam itself is 90 minutes in length. You have, for the 1102, a scale of 100 to 900, and you need to earn a 700 on that scale to pass your exam. That's what we're shooting for. Once you are certified, your certification's good for 3 years. So although there is a retirement date for the exam, once you're certified, doesn't matter what they do with the exam, you're certified for 3 years. It's all locked in at that point. Since this is the 2201102, we will be discussing topics that come from that exam version. So the questions that we go through today will be along the lines of operating systems, security, software troubleshooting, and operational procedures. We will go through probably all of those different domains and probably cycle through a couple of them as we go through all of this. Also let you know that there is a video replay of this live stream available immediately after we're done, but there's also an audio-only podcast that I publish. That's one that I produce later in the day, sometimes the following day, and I post it. So if you have a podcast listening program, you like to listen when you're working out or you like to listen in the car, this is something that can automatically download that file whenever it's available. Simply go to professormesser.com/podcast and add it to your favorite podcast listening program. If you're using a streaming audio service like Spotify, simply search for Professor Messer on Spotify and the podcast will show up there. So there's lots of different ways to be able to find this information so that you can use your time wisely, especially if you're planning and studying for this relatively complex exam with a lot of different topics. And this might be something where you can use some of that downtime when you're in the car, when you're working out, and be that much further ahead with your studies. If you look at our YouTube video description about a day after this is done, you'll notice that timestamps are almost magically appearing in the YouTube video description. It's not really magic. It's my marketing manager, Lori, who's watching the replay. Hey, Lori, she's going through all of this and she's probably listening at 2x speed to get you those timestamps. She puts everything in there so that you can come back to this video and find exactly what you're looking for by simply clicking on that timestamp. And you can go back to any of our archives and do exactly the same thing. Find out on the YouTube video description. Just go to youtube.com or professormesser.com/YouTube, and you'll find us right there along with these additional YouTube video descriptions. There is also, well, of course, we're not here live 24/7. There's also a place you can meet us when we're not live, and that's on our Discord server. Come on over there. We've got tons of people. Thousands of folks have registered and are studying for their A+, their Network+, their Security+, and other IT certifications. And some folks just hanging out just to talk to other people who are in the field of technology. It's a great place to learn. You can open your own study room and manage and control everything that happens in that study room so that if you got a bunch of people together and you'd like to study virtually from anywhere in the world, you can do that on our Discord server. Simply visit professormesser.com/Discord or use the buttons at the top right of our website to find exactly where we might be. Now, eventually you will need to take this exam, and you could certainly go to the CompTIA website and purchase a voucher for full price. But why would you do that when if you live in the US or Canada or US territory, you can purchase a voucher on professormesser.com and it doesn't cost as much. You get a discount by simply purchasing it at professormesser.com. These are official vouchers from CompTIA. I'm a CompTIA certified partner. I'm a platinum partner with CompTIA. So they allow us to get these vouchers at a bit of a discount and pass that savings on to you. Also, if you purchase the voucher on my site, I even give you a little bit more. You get a copy of my Exam Hacks ebook. This is an ebook that you cannot purchase by itself. You can only get this by purchasing a voucher, and it's also included for free with my success bundles. This gives you tips and tricks that you can use during the study process, and I give you tips and tricks that you can use during the exam itself that might get you a few extra points. And sometimes a few extra points can be a difference between passing the exam and not passing the exam. So there's some interesting tips and tricks in there that you may or may not know about. It's included for free when you purchase a voucher from our website by visiting professormesser.com/vouchers. Let's talk about this question we asked earlier, which was, a technician is working with the ext4 file system, as we say here in the South. Which of the following would best describe this system? Would it be Android phone, flash drive, Windows Server, macOS SSD, or Windows 11 Pro? Now, a number of you have locked in your answers already, so we're going to close the poll and see how you did with this one. 41%, although not a majority, certainly the plurality of you chose Android phone. 26% chose flash drive. 14% said Windows Server. 12% said macOS SSD. And then 4%, one single little digit at the bottom, says Windows 11 Pro. Well, the ext4 file system is the one that we were most interested in knowing about. And if you see that file system, you should automatically be thinking Linux, because that is what that file system is commonly associated with. What's interesting, though, is that Linux was not one of the options available to you. There was Android phone, flash drive, Windows Server, Mac OS SSD, and a Windows 11 Pro. But interestingly enough, as you have probably learned as you've gone through this course, the Android operating system is based on Linux. So it uses the same file systems that Linux uses. And in many cases, your Android operating systems on your Android mobile device will be using ext4 as its primary file system, as what you would commonly see as the file system for that particular operating system and that particular device. So that is the answer we were looking for. We were probably looking for Linux, but in the way that Linux is being deployed in this question, it's the Android operating system that would be on an Android phone. A flash drive by itself could have ext4 on it, as could Windows Server, as could macOS SSD, and in some odd cases, I suppose you could even get ext4 running on Windows 11. So technically, ext4 could be applied to any of these scenarios, but that wasn't the question. This is something you will commonly see with CompTIA's exams, by the way, where there could technically be any of these might be the appropriate answer, but you have to read the question, which asks, which of the following would best describe this system? So that is what we're really focusing on here. Although all of these could have an ext4 file system on them, only one of these answers would really be the most likely place you would find ext4. An Android phone is certainly the one that fits that scenario. 41% of you chose that one, and that is exactly the correct answer. Well done. Well, that gets us through our rewind question. Now you should be familiar with going to the links at professormesser.com/QA and answering those questions. So now let's take this up a little bit to a bit more of a detailed level. As many of you are probably aware, on these CompTIA exams, they are not 100% multiple choice questions. The question we just had was a multiple choice question. There was a question and there were multiple answers that you could select from. And even if you didn't know the answer, you had, well, a 20% chance in this case because there were 5 answers here. So you could have guessed at what the right answer is, and you had a 20% chance of getting that right. CompTIA, though, wants to give you some questions where you can't just stumble into the right answer, where you can't simply guess and earn points. They refer to these as performance-based questions, and it's simply an umbrella term that is describing questions that are not multiple choice. So they could be fill in the blank, they could be matching questions, they could be drag and drop questions, they might be pull down menu questions. There's a lot of different ways to ask questions. The important thing to remember, though, is that all of the performance-based questions will be based on topics that are already contained within the official CompTIA exam objectives. So as I like to say, if you know the content, it really doesn't matter how they ask the questions, you will know the answers. So hopefully this will be one that you know as well. I have for you a performance-based question. There were some folks in the chat room in the pre-show that were talking about wanting to get more Linux knowledge, wanting to get more Linux hands-on at the command prompt. Well, here's your chance. So our performance-based question of the month is this one. Here we are at a Linux command line on my computer right here. And there's a file on this system called index.html. And I would like you to perform, or at least type into the prompt that's on your screen. What would you type in to modify the permissions of file index.html? But specifically, I would like you to modify these permissions to have full access to the file owner, and then read and write access to the group owner. So that is what I would like you to be able to provide. I thought I had a third bullet on there too. Do I have a third bullet? So I might have a third one. Nope. Yes, I do. I'm going to open this so you can see it on your screen. And there's a third bullet. Do I not see it on here? Well, like now you got a little bit of a sneak preview. Yeah, there it is. Let's bring that down. I told you it was live, right? So there's the proof that it is. So there are all three of the things I would like you to do. Full access to the file owner, read and write access to the group owner, and then read access to everyone else. So you got 2.5 seconds of some hints there that can help you, which I think should. If you think you know this answer, I would like you to go to the link that is on your screen, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. So I think they will really help you if you know what the command is to do this, and then you will need to know what the parameters of that command happen to be so that you can make those changes. Now, this is probably just one of many different command lines that you need to know for Linux. And it's something that is big on the 2201102, the Core 2 exam. You have to know a lot of command lines in Windows, and you need to know a lot of command lines in Linux. Now, interestingly enough, this command line in Linux, most of the command lines in Linux that you will learn also work as command lines in Mac OS. So memorizing these for Linux also now makes them accessible to you if you are ever running into Mac OS. And just so you're clear, on the screen here, I'm actually running Mac OS. That screenshot is from my Mac OS device, the one that's right in front of me. So here is the question that you want to answer. If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. For this one, I am going to sneak a peek at what folks are typing in and see if you know what the answer happens to be. A lot of you are spot on with the command that you need to use. You're doing a great job of that. I think a lot of the command parameters are somewhat of a challenge, but even some of you are very good at getting that one well. In fact, some of you added some extra pieces into the mix too, which I love. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. Now, if you know the commands or you know the idea of what you want to do, you want to go to the link that's on your screen, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Yeah, this Mac that you're looking at here is a Mac Studio, an M1 Mac Studio. So it's a little bit old at this point. We need to work on getting the newer version of some of those, but it runs so fast. I don't know if Apple's realized the chips they're making are just so good that I don't have to buy a new one every so often. I can run with this one and it edits at 4K and it's just blindingly fast. But occasionally you will need to go through and answer these questions and change command line parameters, change permissions of files. And if you do need to do that, you'll be at the command line of Mac OS or of Linux. If you think you know the answer, please no answers in the chat room. Instead, you want to go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in that answer. Will I edit on a Mac Mini? Well, if that's all I have, I'll edit on a Mac Mini, sure. It's not the best one to use for the amount of video that I edit, but it would work. Would work fine. Hopefully there's some new Macs coming out this month or next, right? So we'll have to see what they do with the Mac Minis. I'm hoping for some upgrades to see what they're doing with that. Should be interesting. So let's now answer this question. From the Linux command line, modify the permissions of file index.html to provide full access to the file owner, read and write access to the group owner, and read access to everyone else. Now, some of you may have seen the little hint about this. You may have seen that, chmod is what you would use to do that. And you would be right. That is the command that changes the mode of this particular object in the file system. And even though this is one that's an odd term, a mode, but Linux is full of odd terms like that. We're really talking about the permissions associated with this particular system object, file system object. In this case, it is a file named index.html. And the syntax for chmod is one where you would use chmod then there's a number of different contexts and different terms you can put here, but very often it's 3 numbers. We'll talk about what those numbers are. It's on the screen. And then the name of the file that you would like to modify the mode of, and that changes the mode of that. So the real question is, what are those 3 numbers about? In this case, it's 744. Well, if you were to look at this particular line of this file, this is what you would view if you did an ls command with a -l. So it would be more of an extended view of the listing. And you would see to the left side are a number of letters, in some cases dashes. The dashes indicate that there's nothing in that particular place. It would be very much like a 0 is where that dash is. What it really is a combination of 3 different parameters or 3 different permissions or modes that are configured for this particular object. So for this object of script.sh, you can see that it's -rwx r-r-r-. Now, at first glance, that just looks like a bunch of letters and a bunch of hyphens, and who knows what that is. But if you were to break it apart, like I've done here, the first column is one that is used to designate the type of object that this happens to be. If it's a file object like this, there's just a hyphen. If it's a directory, there's a D in that particular column. And there are other terms that can be used in that first column as well. For the purposes of the chmod command, we're just going to ignore that first column for the moment. And let's look at the last 9 columns, which are separated into 3 groups of 3. The first 3 are the user group. The second is the group, if you will. And the third is everything else. So this is where you set permissions for the user of the file, permissions for everyone who's in the group, and permissions for everybody who's neither the user or the group, which is everyone else. So this is, by the way, helps you understand on this line what the user is and what the group is. And it's literally listed next to this file that is here. Professor is the name of the user. That's me. This is my system. And the term or the word right after that is the name of the group that has access to this file. In this case, the group name is staff. And then that's all you need to know, because the third group is everyone else who is not a user or a group. So finally, after knowing all of that, we can look at this line and we can break it apart and see that the user has read, write, and execute access. The group has read access, and everyone else also has read access. And we can, of course, modify each one of those by either specifying the letters in the chmod command, which often we don't do. Often we use numbers to make that determination. For example, RWX is a 7. If it's just a read only, it's a 4. And how do they come up with that? Well, this is where, if you're familiar at all with binary, this can be pretty useful, because now this is binary. If you have all 3 of those, a 1, and a 1, that is in the 1s column, the 2 column, and the 4 column, 4, 5, 6, 7. So if you combine all of those together and count them up, that's a 7. And that's why read, write, and execute is the number 7. So if you wanted to give just execute permission, that's in the very first column that we designate as the 1s column. So execute only would be a 1. All right, how about write and execute? That would be in the 2 column and the 1 column. Combine those together, that's a 3. So 3 would be indeed write and execute. So if you know binary, you can easily determine what those happen to be based on the numbers and reverse everything out. That means that read, write, and execute would be a 7, read and write would be a 6, read and execute would be a 5, and so on all the way through the list. Now that we know this, let's go back to our question and see if we can break this out a bit. So we have this index.html. It is a RWX, 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 which means that the current mode before we make these changes is 777. So before I made this screenshot, I did a chmod of this file. I did a chmod 777 index.html, and that's what I got. But now I'm giving you a prompt telling you that I would like full access to the file owner, read and write access to the group owner, and then read access to everyone else. So we already know these will be 3 different numbers that we would use. And if we do the math, we know that the 7 is full access, read, write, and execute. If we do the math and figure out read and write access, that would be a 6, because it would be the first two, be the 4 column and the 2 column. Combine those together, that's a 6. And then lastly, we have the 4 at the end. That is simply read access. And once we do the chmod, and this is always a good check, if you're ever doing a chmod and you're trying to remember, was I supposed to use a 4 or a 5 there? You can look at the results. So after I did the chmod 764, I did another ls-la of index.html, and you can see that rwx is there. That is 7. RW nothing is there. And if we count in binary, that's 4 and 2. That's a 6. That's where the 6 is in the 764. And the last one is R blank blank, which means we only have one thing in the column that is a 4. That means that number would be 4. Indeed, 764. And that's the answer we were looking for. That makes index.html have full access to the file owner, have read and write access to the group owner, and read access to everyone else. That finally gets us to the answer of chmod 764 index.html. And if that's what you typed in to your blank that was there on the screen, then you got it absolutely correct. Some of you even went a little bit further. Some of you Linux familiar folks even used other tags. For example, some of you used the -r command to be able to recursively change this file across nested subdirectories in Linux. We didn't need to do that for this particular question. In fact, technically that would not be correct, because there might be another index.html file somewhere in a nested directory that we don't want to have those permissions. So in a way, you have to be very careful when you're using the -R for recursiveness to make sure that you don't accidentally cause any problems when you are doing that. So that is the answer we were looking for, chmod 764 index.html. If that's what you typed into this, you got it absolutely correct. Now, this one was a little bit more complex than some of the questions that you might see on the exam, but I really wanted to see if we understood the chmod command and if we were able to use it in its particular context. And now that we've done that, if they ask you an easier question about chmod, you'll absolutely get that question right. So pretty useful to know those. Hopefully, you are familiar with those particular commands and how they work. And if you are someone who is still trying to grasp what those might happen to be, make sure you check out our video on Linux command lines so that you can really get a feel for how this particular command would be used. In fact, you can follow along with us as you are going through it, and that might be something that you can use as well. If you're trying to find that, it comes directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. Later on, we'll talk to you about how you can find your list of those objectives for free. Let's do another question. Let's go back to multiple choice, shall we? That'd be a good idea. This multiple choice question asks, a system administrator automatically restarts a Windows service each morning at 2 a.m. Which of the following would be the most likely method of automating this process? Would it be Python, shell script, JavaScript, PowerShell, VBScript? Something we do need to know as an administrator. The question again asks, a system administrator automatically restarts a Windows service each morning at 2 a.m. Which of the following would be the most likely method of automating this process? Would it be Python, shell script, JavaScript, PowerShell, or VBScript? If you think you know the answer, lock it in at the link you see here, professormesser.com/QA, to see if you happen to know what this one might be. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We're going to pretend that we are in front of the actual exam. We don't have any hints available to us. We can't Google anything. We have to do this ourselves. In fact, the thing I'm thinking is, what Windows service do they have to restart every morning at 2 a.m.? I bet they have a memory leak. I bet they need to reset it every day to make sure that it works. These are things that we do in the practical world of system administration, is we can't modify the code of the executable. We have to wait for the patch from the company that designed the software. And who knows when the patch is going to arrive. But in the meantime, we're dealing with this memory leak that after a day and a half, the whole system hangs up and we have to reboot everything and we have a bunch of downtime. So to avoid that, we simply reboot the system on a very regular basis to clear out the memory and restart the leak. So we're effectively fixing the symptom and not fixing the problem. And sometimes that's just as good. Sometimes that works just fine. And we can automate the process even better. Now, again, all of these answers, I think, could technically be used. Most of these could technically be used to be able to perform this restart. But again, that wasn't the question. The question was, a system administrator automatically restarts a Windows service each morning at 2 a.m. Which of the following would be the most likely method of automating this process? So that's where we want to focus, is understanding of these different scripting languages, and all 5 of these indeed are scripting languages. Which one is the one that would be the best one to use in this scenario? Which would be the most likely one to use in this scenario? So let's see what you chose. We'll stop the poll and see what you think the answer is. And you can see that 66% of you say the answer is PowerShell, which is pretty good. Now you can see that 16% said a shell script should be what you would use. 9% said JavaScript. We've got Python at 4% and VBScript at 4%. Those are tied for last place. Nobody thinks we could use Python for this? Well, that wasn't the question, was it? I'm kind of going through that and figuring out the details of how we would work through all of these. But that indeed is how we kind of focus on what the answers are. If I was going to do this on my Windows system and I wanted it to happen automatically using a scripting language that natively understood how to restart a service on a Windows machine, and it was integrated into the operating system at such a level that it understood Windows services natively, I would be using PowerShell. PowerShell is included with Windows. It is remarkable in its functionality. It understands so much about Windows because it's built into the Windows operating system. It's exactly how we would focus on that. So if you were trying to do anything in Windows that kind of needed to be managed at the operating system level, you needed a scripting language that understood the details of Windows, PowerShell is your go-to. In fact, if you're someone who is trying to get a job with a company and administer systems that are Windows-based, you should learn as much as you can about PowerShell. It will allow you to automate and be able to do a lot of things for you without you having to be there. And who wouldn't want that? It's a great way to do it. PowerShell is the number one automation for Windows systems. In fact, the 2 that I would probably focus on at this point, one, I would use PowerShell and learn as much as I could about that. I would also learn as much as I could about Python as well, which has become, in many ways, the de facto scripting language and automation language that we use for cloud-based systems, but it will work across multiple operating systems. Python itself, however, doesn't have an inherent knowledge of Windows services. You would have to use some other command line to be able to control that from Python. So Python would be kind of, you have to have a middleman that Python can use to be able to access those services. Python doesn't know how to do that by itself. So that's the big difference, where PowerShell doesn't need a middleman. PowerShell already knows how to handle services. It'll take it from here. You don't have to include any other libraries. You don't have to include any other executables. You don't have to run other programs. PowerShell does everything built in. And that was what we were trying to get to with this particular question. And that's why PowerShell is the right answer. 66% of you chose PowerShell as the option. Now, a shell script would be something that 16% of you chose. Shell scripts are the type of script you would run in a shell. And generally speaking, a shell is something you would find in a Linux, a POSIX, a Mac OS type system. So shell scripts are not something that commonly runs on a Windows machine. So that's even more middlemen. You would be running a shell script in Linux that called some function that ran something else in Windows that finally restarted the service. You had to go through a couple of extra steps if you were trying to use a shell script, which is why, although a number of you chose that option, that would really be if this was a Linux service. If this question just changed that one word from Windows to Linux, I'd be with you on shell script. That would be exactly what we would use. But in this case, that was not. It was a Windows service. So shell script would not be what we would use. We have JavaScript, which is a scripting language that runs inside of your browser. This is different than Java. Java is a different programming language to JavaScript, which unfortunately has a similar name associated with it, but no relationship between those two. JavaScript is used to automate things within a browser. The Windows service is not running in a browser, therefore JavaScript is not going to be your best choice here either. Then we have Python, and I've already mentioned how popular Python is for doing different chores, but Python would not be your best choice to restart a Windows service since PowerShell is already listed as one of these options here. If PowerShell wasn't here, between the four that are left, I would go with Python. That's what I would use because I could run Python natively in Windows instead of running something in a shell script on a Linux machine that was somewhere else. So we're trying to keep everything on the same machine, keep it as simple as possible. But because PowerShell is on this list, Python does not qualify. So sorry, Python. And then lastly, VBScript, Visual Basic Scripting for Windows, commonly used to manage certain types of Windows applications and to automate the processes. So if you're using Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, Microsoft PowerPoint, the VB scripting language is built into those applications, and you can automate a lot of functions within those programs using VBScript. VBScript, however, can also be used to modify things in the Windows operating system itself, but VBScript does not have an inherent knowledge of Windows services, so it would not be the best to use. And in fact, VBScript probably not the most secure way to automate inside of Windows. I think keeping that as what effectively amounts to macros in a program is probably the best use of VBScript, and it's what I would recommend to you as well. So in this case, PowerShell is the answer that we were looking for. 66% of you got that one absolutely right. Well done. Let's do another one. Next question on our list asks, a Windows administrator is adding an alternate configurate. Let's see if I want to do this one right now. Do I have this next one up? I might want to change to a different question on this one because I do have a different set of questions that I would like to use for this. So we're going to go back to the question we had earlier. In fact, I'm going to flip back to our Windows PowerShell and I'm going to modify a couple of things on my side so that we can get a better view of this question. I think I want to give you something else instead of the one that was there for a couple of reasons, because I know what's coming up next. I know what the next question is on this one. So we're going to use the one that I'm about to present to you on the screen. Then we'll circle back on the other piece here so that you can have the answer that I was looking at. So this question asks, an attacker is sending phishing emails to the CFOs of all major transportation companies. Which of the following would best describe this attack type? Is this, let's put this up on the screen, is this an insider threat, tailgating, spear phishing, on-path, or evil twin? An attacker is sending phishing emails to the CFOs of all major transportation companies. Which of the following would best describe this attack type? Would it be insider threat, tailgating, spear phishing, on-path, or evil twin? So a security question, I wanted to bring up a security question next. So that's why we shifted gears over to this question. Hopefully this is an attack type that you are familiar with. It's an indirect way to ask the question, but then again, on your exam, there are a lot of indirect ways to answer questions on the exam. They tend to ask questions this way without a direct answer, but a direct way to focus on it. If you think you know the answer, please use the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We will instead see if you know the answer to this one. When a lot of people answer very quickly, I'm always wondering if we really knew this one or if we're all getting this one wrong. So I have a feeling we all know this one. I'm hoping we all know this one. We're going to see if that is the way things work on this one. Let's see how we did. The question asks, an attacker is sending phishing emails to the CFOs of all major transportation companies. Which of the following would best describe this attack type? Would it be insider threat, tailgating, spear phishing, on path, or evil twin? Let's close our poll and see that our answers, 89% of you say the answer is spear phishing. 89%. That's pretty strong because it's single digits for everything else. 1% for insider threat, 3% for tailgating, 2% for on path, 1% for evil twin. So this is a very interesting one for those of you that are working on security as the things that you would like to be able to do. If someone is directing an attack to a very specific group or a specific subset of a group, then we're talking about being a very directed, like at the very point of this attack is really directed at that particular group. And in that particular case, that would be spear phishing. That's exactly what you chose. The 89% of you chose spear phishing. This is being able to target a very specific group or even a very specific person to be able to attack. And this is one where, in this particular case, CFOs have a lot of control of an organization's money. In fact, I would say the CFO probably has more control of the finances of an organization than the CEO actually has. And whenever somebody's trying to attack a CFO, they're trying to attack a CEO, they're probably after a really big number. They're after some big resources. They're going after either a lot of money or they're going after something that would gain them a lot by attacking that particular person. When you're getting something so big in return for this attack, we refer to that attack type as a whaling, sort of like a spearfish. Obviously, if you think back to the Moby Dick and using spears to be able to kill the whales, thankfully we don't do that any longer. But that is why you see those terms of spear fishing, and in this particular case, whaling, if you're going after something that would be a really, really, really big catch. So I think we've pretty much just torn the terms apart as far as fishing is concerned. Are we not using trolling enough? Did we not use maybe fishing in the rocks? I'm not sure. There's a lot of different fishing terms we can use here, but spear phishing is the one that certainly fits this particular scenario because the attacker was sending out phishing emails, but they didn't send phishing emails just to anybody. They got a very specific list in a very specific market. So they went after transportation companies, but even more so, they went after one person in each of these transportation companies, hoping that they would be able to find a way in. This, by the way, is a very common strategy for the attackers. They like to focus on specific vertical markets. And we often see this if you're someone who subscribes to the weekly SANS newsletters. They have a great summary of all of the attacks that occurred during the week. And very often you'll notice that there is a trend. There will be a lot of attacks to healthcare, especially hospitals. Then the next month, there'll be a lot of attacks to state and local government agencies. And then the month after that will be a lot of attacks to restaurants. So the attackers know that there are weaknesses with certain types of businesses and certain organizations, and they try to take advantage of those weaknesses. That in no other way better describes the idea of spear phishing. They are very good at it, and they're really working through the details of understanding that. And you knew it too, because 89% of you got the answer of spear phishing spot on. I'll also let you know, because we've now gone through so many different topics associated with this. We've talked about security. We've talked about the command line in Linux. We've talked about scripting and a lot of other pieces. Obviously, on your exam, you may be asked about any of these topics. And of course, all of my videos, every A+ video I have, provides you with a comprehensive description of these topics, tells you exactly what you need to know to pass the exam and based on these particular topics. One of the things that's a challenge, though, if you look at my videos, 137 videos. That's what it happened to be. And it's 19 hours of content. And although I really recommend you watch all 137 videos and you go through all 19 hours of content, I also recognize that not everyone is able to do that. So that's why I have a way to take all of the video content and be able to use it offline using my course notes. My course notes are a summary of the text and the graphics and the tables from my actual videos. So if you missed a video, it's okay. All the content from the video is in here and separated out as that particular video. So everything in the overview of Windows video is right here, including not just the text, but all of the tables that I have for that particular video. If you're looking at command lines, here's all the Windows command line tools. They're right here on one single page. Well, I guess 2 pages because there's a lot of command lines. And even the network-based command lines are on this page as well. So anything that's in the video that's important is also in here. I try to do that with all of my course notes. Not only do we have the digital version, we have a physical version of the course notes. I guess I should show you the front of that one. The physical version is one that contains exactly the same content as the digital version. Obviously, it's the same thing. It's still in color. There's the same command lines and the same tables and the same information you'd be looking for. All of those same graphics and charts and the nice walkthroughs that we have in the videos, they're also in this book as well. So if you wanted a printed version that you can take with you, that's something that you can use as well. Simply go to my website, ProfessorMesser.com. You can find the link to these in the main menu, or go to ProfessorMesser.com/1102 notes. It's another great way to help you with your studies. It also helps us keep everything running on this side as well. I think that's a win-win. And maybe this is something that you'll also combine with our practice exams so that you can get a little bit of a discount. We'll talk about those practice exams in just a bit. In the meantime, let's do another question. I have another one for you here. Let's make sure that I get the questions right this time. I think that would be good. And of course, it doesn't. I have all kinds of interesting questions on here that I put into this presentation, but not necessarily done the best job of making sure that this would work its way. No, I did do it right. So we're going to take this next question, and it asks, a label printing computer reboots itself randomly about 6 times a day. Which of the following should be used to troubleshoot this issue? Would we add more RAM, run Windows Startup Repair, modify the Windows Boot Configuration Database, run a hardware diagnostic, or replace the hard drive with an SSD? Got a few things we can do here. The question again asks, a label printing computer reboots itself randomly about 6 times a day. Which of the following should be used to troubleshoot this issue? Should we add more RAM, run Windows Startup Repair, modify the Windows Boot Configuration Database, run a hardware diagnostic, or replace the hard drive with an SSD? If you think you know the answer, please don't answer in the chat room. You instead want to go to the link that's on your screen. Go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. See if you know what this one happens to be. This is one that goes back to the idea of the troubleshooting process. I think a lot of people often look at the troubleshooting process that's documented in the exam objectives, and they think that it is some standalone thing that only CompTIA made up. But in fact, it's the same troubleshooting process we use for practically anything. If we have a network problem, we use that troubleshooting process. If we have a security question, we use the troubleshooting process. And if we have a system that is rebooting itself 6 times a day, then we will also use that same troubleshooting process. So that broad troubleshooting process is one that can really help you. Not only help you to resolve the problem, but when somebody says, what do we do first? What do we do second? What do we do third? Also helps you with that as well. And in fact, this is a really good example of where you would want to be able to know how to do something first, how to do something second, and how to do something third. This one is clearly what we need to do first. I think that's where we should kind of focus our efforts and break them down. We'll have to see if we happen to know this one. Let's see if you did. The question again asks, a label printing computer reboots itself randomly about 6 times a day. Which of the following should be used to troubleshoot this issue? Ironically, fire was not one of the answers. Add more RAM, run Windows Startup Repair, modify the Windows boot configuration database, run a hardware diagnostic, or replace the hard drive with an SSD. What did you choose? Let's find out. We'll close the poll, and we can see that 75% of you say you'd run a hardware diagnostic. Doesn't actually fix the problem, though, does it? Well, that wasn't the question. The question was, what should you use to troubleshoot the issue? And a number of you said, 9% said run Windows Startup Repair, 8% said modify the Windows boot configuration database, 5% said add more RAM. Nobody said replace the hard drive with an SSD, which in my mind you should just do anyway. Just get rid of those hard drives and put an SSD in there to be able to work with them. The problem when you run into a system that is just unstable, that is, it is not something you would have to deal with. It would be something that was causing a problem, and in this particular case, rebooting randomly 6 times a day, then you need to go through a process of understanding, why is that unstable? Obviously, that's not normal. We're not getting an error message. There's no comment in the question about an error message. We don't have anything here that even describes anything else about the problem. It is really quite the issue. So whenever we're trying to find out why is this system constantly rebooting itself, it would be good to know if we had a good foundation. If you're going to build a house, you want to be sure that you're building the house on solid ground. The same thing applies with your computer. If you want an operating system to run on that computer, we need solid ground. So we need to be sure that the hardware that we're running on can really be relied upon. Can we really run an operating system on this hardware, or do we have bad memory? Is the CPU an issue? Do we have a loose connection? Is there a problem with the power? Is there an issue with the hard drive? We don't know any of that. And something that's rebooting so often is something that would really be quite a challenge. So running a hardware diagnostic is a perfect first step, especially for something like this. Obviously, Windows doesn't normally reboot 6 times a day. That's not something Windows commonly does. We can all laugh about it and point and say that Windows is something that could reboot 6 times a day, but it generally does not. Windows is a relatively stable operating system, certainly more stable than rebooting itself 6 times a day. So that is not something we would run into. Hardware diagnostic would be a perfect thing to do to be able to see if this is an issue. Now, if the hardware diagnostic came back and everything is working perfectly, then maybe at that point we can redirect our efforts towards the software that is running on that hardware, because now we understand we have solid ground. We have a foundation. We have something we can trust to run our operating system on. So that's the idea of running the hardware diagnostic and make that happen. Now, what about these other answers? Why didn't we choose one of these other answers to be able to decide on this one? 9% said run Windows Startup Repair. Windows Startup Repair is a great utility, especially if your system is not booting. It starts the boot process and then fails, or maybe it is cycling through the boot process. The Startup Repair can very often fix that issue. But our problem here wasn't the system not booting up. The problem is that it's working normally and then just suddenly reboots itself. It's booting just fine. That's not the issue. So I think if you are someone who is focusing on trying to understand where are the problems and how do I fix them, that Windows Startup Repair, we don't have a problem with booting. So Windows Startup Repair isn't going to help us. Along those same lines, 8% of you said modify the Windows boot configuration database. During the startup process, Windows needs to know where it is located so that it can start itself. There's a bootloader that starts with Windows that will go to the appropriate storage drive, to the appropriate folder, find the file that starts up Windows and runs that file, runs that executable. Well, to be able to do that, we need to point to the right storage drive, the right folder, and the right file. And the thing that points Windows in that direction is the Windows Boot Configuration Database, among other things. The Windows Boot Configuration Database, obviously an important database in Windows to be able to do that. If that's modified or if it's changed or if it's corrupted, Windows simply will not boot. Well, that's not our problem. Windows is booting fine. It's just doing it too much. It's just rebooting itself constantly throughout the day. So, every hour and a half, it's rebooting itself. So modifying the boot configuration database at this point would only break things. It would not fix anything. We have 5% that said add more RAM. It could be that this problem is a memory leak. It could be that this problem is because the system does not have enough memory. But nothing in the question pointed to any memory problems. There's no statistics in the question regarding memory usage. There's no error messages in this question that have anything to do with memory. So immediately changing the configuration of a system based on a whim, based on an idea, is very inefficient. Because then all you're doing is just throwing ideas out, hoping that one of those ideas is going to fix it. The problem that I see often is that maybe this problem is a memory leak. And they add more RAM, hey, and the system stays up all day, or it stays up for 4 hours a day. Hey, we fixed it because it's now 4 hours instead of an hour and a half every time it reboots. Well, that didn't fix anything. You simply just changed the symptom to something else. And it gives people a false sense of security. They think that I followed the proper troubleshooting, when in fact, we didn't troubleshoot at all. We just took a particular idea and did it and saw what happened. We're making changes without actually knowing what the problem is, and that's definitely what we don't want to do. And then lastly, 0% said replace the hard drive with an SSD, although I think that's just a good best practice, generally speaking. That has nothing to do with the system rebooting itself. It will reboot itself just as much with an SSD as it will with a hard drive. The only difference will be it will reboot much faster with the SSD. That's not what we're trying to do either. We're not trying to increase the speed of the reboot cycle. We're trying to get rid of it completely. And that's why running a hardware diagnostic of these 5 things that are available, of the following, those are the 5 things. That also brings up an interesting point that was made in the chat room, that someone mentioned, well, I would do this before I ran a hardware diagnostic. I would do this particular thing. Well, I would also do this before running a hardware diagnostic. And maybe those would be an appropriate thing to do first, but that wasn't the question. The question is, which of the following should be used to troubleshoot this issue? So you've got 5 options here. You're locked into these 5. Of these 5 things, which one is the one that you would use? That's what this question is asking. And it may be that the thing that you wanted to do, some people said, I would go look at Event Viewer. What if you're not in the Windows team and you don't have access to the Event Viewer? That's not an option for you, so it's not listed here. So I can come up with a scenario where the things you want to do are not available, and we have these 5 things. So whenever you're reading through these questions on your exam and you're thinking, that's not what I would do, maybe it isn't. And in fact, in a normal troubleshooting scenario, there might be other things we are doing, but that wasn't the question. The question is, of these 5 things or 4 things on the exam, what would you look at? What would you examine first? So it's trying to point you down a particular direction and have you make a decision based on these 5 things that just happen to be available to you at any particular time. Unlike computers at home, when you start working in a large organization, there will be one group that takes care of hardware, another group that takes care of the operating system, another group that takes care of the applications, another group that takes care of Active Directory, another group that takes care of VPN, and none of them allow anyone else access into their world. So you do not always have full control of any particular computer in a corporate environment. Not always the case. And so these questions do tend to be a little more realistic, because here are the 5 things you can do. Which one of those do you do first? That's really what the question is asking, being able to figure out the details. And I would say it could be a number of things. You could have bad memory in the system. It could be a loose connection. You could have a power supply problem. There might be an issue that's not hardware related. It might be an issue with a driver. There might be a bug in the label printing software. It might actually be a memory leak. We don't know, because we don't have any more details. But you have to start somewhere. And from these 5 things, the best place to start would be to run a hardware diagnostic. We do have time for another question. Let's fit another one into this mix. Before we do that, I'm going to make sure that when we bring up this and have a look, that I'm giving you the right answer. I love that I'm going through the process of breaking these down to see what the answers might be. So let's go through this next question that asks, a technician has modified the source code and compiled a new version of a network utility. Which of the following would best describe this software? Would this be FOSS, EULA, NDA, concurrent, or perpetual? A technician has modified the source code and compiled a new version of a network utility. Which of the following would best describe this software? Is it FOSS, EULA, NDA, concurrent, or perpetual? If you think you know the answer, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, you want to follow the link on your screen. Go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. It's got to be one of those. That is what we would find. Some folks on the last one were saying, what's a label printer? Oh, wait till you get to work with the folks in shipping and receiving. You'll find out really quick what a label printing computer does. They rely on that to be able to send out these pieces of equipment. And if you're a company that has to ship product on the last day of a quarter, that is a very important machine. Because if that doesn't get shipped out on the last day of the quarter, you can't recognize the revenue for that. So as we get to the very end of the last day of a quarter, the importance of a label printing computer becomes even more important to the organization. In fact, it is the most important machine in the entire company in that particular scenario. So you will run into those quite often, where depending on the time of the day of the week, the time of the quarter, you may find that different devices become very, 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 very important. More important than you ever thought they might be. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, a technician has modified the source code and compiled a new version of a network utility. Which of the following would best describe this software? Is it FOSS, EULA, NDA, concurrent, or perpetual? This is a question that maybe you've run into. Let's close the poll and see what you think the answer is. FOSS. 57% of you have answered FOSS for this one. That certainly is the majority. We've got 15% though that say the answer is concurrent, 10% that say EULA, 9% that say perpetual, and 6% that say NDA. So a nice healthy smattering of answers, even from the ones that were not the primary piece of this. So whenever you start talking about licenses, you start talking about needing to manage the legalities of using certain types of software, you should probably be very familiar with free and open source software, or the abbreviation for that is indeed FOSS, F-O-S-S. This is one where the source code's right there. You go to the internet, the source code, it's free and open. You can see the entire source code. This is what we often have with source code that you would find on most open source projects. And that's why we call them open source, because the source is available for you to view. Not only can you view it, you can also go into the process of changing the source because you have access to the source. Try that with Microsoft Word. Try that with Microsoft Excel. Try that with your browser, running the Chrome browser. You don't have access to the source code. You can't compile your own version of the executable because you don't have access to the source code. But with FOSS, free and open source, you do have access to the source code. If it's not accessible, then it's probably commercial software. You get it from Microsoft, you get it from other places. It's already compiled. You don't have access to those. If it's something, one of the things that you'll notice when you install the software, you see this every time you install it, is there's a big bunch of text that you simply scroll all the way down and press I agree without ever reading it. That particular document is a legal document known as an end-user license agreement, or EULA. And it describes what you can do with that software, how the software is supposed to be used, and how many backups, for example, you can make of the software. That is exactly where it would be. These topics and even more are in section 4.8. You see it right here at the bottom of the 2/2011-02. The video this is from is called Privacy, Licensing, and Policies. And free and open source software is indeed the correct answer for this particular question because we modified the source code. We changed the code itself, and then we compiled a new version. So if you find a misspelling, you can fix the spelling and recompile the code. If you want to add your own features, you can do that. If you want to disable features, you can do that. You have access to the code. So we'll have a look at what the differences are by going through that section. FOSS is not the only thing that we need to know. And now we also know why it's not an end user license agreement. That EULA is something that is associated with any type of software, whether it's open source or not. We have 15% that said the answer was concurrent, which means we would be using this software in multiple systems at the same time. Well, it's more of a licensing question. It really has nothing to do with modifying source code and compiling new versions. So concurrent would not apply for this particular scenario, and perpetual would not. Perpetual describes the way that you purchase the software. Is this one that you pay for the software one time and you have full access to this software without having to pay annual maintenance? That is a perpetual license. Very different for a subscription license. That would be the alternative to perpetual, where you have to pay a certain amount every month, every year, or in standard times of maybe quarterly, maybe every 3 years. There's different terms depending on what you're purchasing. And then lastly, NDA stands for non-disclosure agreement. Non-disclosure agreement is a contract that usually one or two parties will sign together that state that whatever we talk about amongst each other will stay with us. We will not mention anything about this information to anyone else other than what is listed in the non-disclosure agreement itself, which is usually nobody. So if you are ever in a meeting with a third party and they're bringing in a new version of software and they want to show it to you before it's released, they'll have you sign a non-disclosure agreement so that you can see the new version, but you can't tell anybody what you've seen. That's a very good use of a non-disclosure agreement and being able to work with it. I know that we are at the top of the hour for this, but I want to get one more question in, if that's okay with you. Let's scroll down here to the bottom of this list because I want to show you a question that comes from a set that I wrote. This is my practice exams book. One of the things I found is I went out to the internet to try to find some practice questions one day. And first, I didn't find a lot of them. And secondly, I didn't find very good ones. A lot of the questions on the internet are just not good. I suspect they were not written by anyone who's ever done this for a living. And certainly it looked like they were not someone who's ever taken a CompTIA exam, because a lot of the questions I found had nothing to do with what you might find on a CompTIA exam. I also found a lot of outdated questions that ask information about topics that are no longer even included in the official exam objectives. So I thought the best way to address this would be to write my own. So I did. I wrote a practice exams book that has 3 practice exams inside of it. That's a big book. There are 90 questions in each of these. In these 3 total exams, 90 questions each. So 380 pages in this book. And has a lot of detail. So I thought we'd take a question from the book and have a look at what you think the answer might be. Again, of course, no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, we're going to look at this question that asks, this is from A42, which is on, what page is this in my book? It's previous page is 15. So this is page 16. Question A42 asks, a technician is installing a fresh Windows operating system on a file server. Unfortunately, the drive controller in the system is not recognized during the installation process. Which of the following would be the best way to manage this issue? Would we load third-party drivers, restart the system, use a remote network installation, or boot from the recovery partition? Now, because this is a PDF, I can go to the annotation features in my PDF reader, and I can highlight or mark different things that I would like to choose. And if I think you know the answer, you can mark them on here. If you're using a tablet, you can use your stylus to write on it and have different things that are there. Now, I, of course, have the answer in the book. We're on page 16. If you just want to know whether the answer is A, B, C, or D, you can go to page 33. If you want more detail, though, and I do want more detail about this one, you can go to page 78. Well, to go from page 16 to page 78, you'd have to scroll. But this is a PDF. So all I have to do is go to the words, the details. Notice my cursor changes to a little hand, and I can click on that, and it hot links over to page, whatever that page happened to be, page 67 or 68 or whatever that was. goes 60 pages ahead. There's our question at the top, and it says the answer is A, load third-party drivers. And I give you detailed explanation here on why I believe that is the right answer, so that you can, if you chose that one, you can see that, yes, I chose it for the right reason. My reasoning for choosing that answer is the same as the reasoning that's in this book. The problem I have with a lot of these questions, though, especially the ones online, is I never get them right. And it never tells me why I got it wrong. So there's an opportunity missed there, because if you get a question wrong, that's the time you really need to learn. That's the time when you really want to understand, why did I get the question wrong? So in my book, every incorrect answer is documented. I explain why every single incorrect answer is the incorrect answer for this one. And then you can explain to me, maybe you thought the answer was restart the system. Well, here's my explanation on why I think it isn't. Maybe you thought the answer was use a remote network installation. Now you understand why that would not be the best option. Or maybe you think the answer was boot from the recovery partition, and we have an explanation of why that's not going to help you as well. So not only did we get the answer and understand what the right answer was, we understood why the wrong answers were wrong. And I will even tell you, if you got the answer right, go ahead and read the wrong answers too, because the topics you get on your exam might be one of these. And now you've read through the explanation of what those might be as well. Now, if you read the question and you didn't understand any of it, you're trying to figure out, what are you talking about? What is installing and drive controllers? I don't know what you're talking about. Well, fortunately, at the very bottom of this is a QR code and a hot link that will take you to the video where I explain this process. So another opportunity to learn a little bit more about that particular topic and to fill in any gaps you might have about those particular technologies. Once we're done with this, I go to the back button. Did you know that your PDF reader has a back button? Most of them do on the desktop. A few of them do on your tablets and mobile devices. It's a back button. It's right up here. I'm going to click the back button, and now we're back to where we started. And now I can simply go to the next question on the list. That is my practice exams book. That has 90 questions, 3 separate exams of 90 questions each, 5 performance-based questions in each of these 3 exams. So 15 performance-based questions that are in the book. And of course, there's both a digital and a physical edition that you can choose from. And of course, if you purchase the physical edition, just as with my course notes, you get the digital edition for free. So while you're waiting on this to be delivered to you, you can download the digital PDF immediately and start stepping through it. That's all on my website. And if you buy these 2 together, there is a little bit of a price break. So you might want to consider getting both at the same time so that you save a little bit of money. Find out more on my website, professormesser.com/core2pe, for more information about the practice exams. Also, let you know, I mentioned earlier that one of the best resources that you can use before you start your studies, and one of the best resources that you can use before you go to take your exam, are CompTIA's own official exam objectives. And even better, they're free to download and use. They're on the CompTIA website. If you want a link that will take you right over to the CompTIA website, you can go to professormesser.com/objectives, or you can certainly go to your favorite search engine and type into the Google machine or anything else, CompTIA exam objectives, and it will, of course, take you to the appropriate page. The exam objectives themselves have a bulleted list of everything you need to know. It's all in here. And if it's not in this list, it's not going to be on the exam. They very, very rarely deviate from this list, which means we can be laser focused with exactly what we need to know for this exam. And if you ever have a question and wondering, is that topic really on the test? Now you have a definitive document that will answer that question for you. This is the exam objectives. And you'll notice in my videos, I stick to these objectives to the letter. You get exactly what you need to pass this exam from my videos because I followed exactly what CompTIA said would be on the exam itself. This is also a free document, and it's available on the CompTIA website. A great checklist. Make sure you get your hands on that. That is almost more valuable than anything else you will use for this exam. This is one of the reasons if you get some of these big books, that in appendix in these big books is a copy of the objectives. That's why. That's how important these objectives are. We all can agree with that one. So something you should consider. And as I mentioned before, it's free and you can't beat that price either. We do one of these study groups for A+ every month. We actually do 2 study groups for A+ every month, a Core 1 and a Core 2. We have some already scheduled for next month on the 5th and the 7th, assuming, of course, there's not going to be yet another hurricane. We know that we will be presenting the Core 1 on November the 5th and the Core 2 on November the 7th. We've also got scheduled a Network Plus on the 13th of November. And although we have scheduled a Security Plus on the 20th of November, we still have our Security Plus we haven't done for October yet. So come back next week, Wednesday of next week, and we will have Security Plus. If we ever have to change these dates, just like we had to do with this particular event, I will always change the event in the calendar first thing. So if you ever want the most updated list of when these events are going to occur, go to the link on your screen, go to professormesser.com/calendar, and it will tell you exactly when those events are. And keep checking in, because sometimes they change a couple of times before we're able to lock them in and finally get them there. Well, we've gone through an hour of Q&A, but there's plenty more Q&A to come. Instead of me asking you questions, why don't we spend some time where you can ask me questions? It's time for our after show. Stick around for that. It's coming up next, right after this. You don't have to touch a thing. Stay exactly where you are, and you can ask questions. We'll tell you more about that in a moment. Don't forget about our course notes and practice exams. They're available on our website at professormesser.com/1102success. We also have our discounted vouchers. Instead of paying full price at the CompTIA website, you can pay less than full price at professormesser.com/vouchers. And of course, we are all over social media, and we want to be where you are. So you can simply type in professormesser.com/ the name of the site you would like to find us on, /Facebook, /Discord, /Twitter, /LinkedIn, /Google+. Nope, no more Google+. Won't find us there. What was the Google? There was a Google project. They bought someone. It was more of a Twitter that Google had. I'm trying to remember the name. Someone will think of this in the chat room. Someone will tell me in the chat room. The problem is, if you look at the list of businesses that Google has purchased and is no longer supporting product-wise, it's a big list that you would have to go through. Perhaps we'll do that in the after show. Another interesting one to stick around and figure out. In the meantime, though, this is a great place to transition over to the after show. Thank you so much for joining us in this first hour. We have such a good time doing this Q&A, seeing how the questions go and learning more about these topics that are on the A+ exam objectives. And now let's see what other questions you might have in the after show. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will absolutely see you in the after show next time on the A+ study group. Thanks, everyone. All right, let's transition now and move things over to the after show side. I need a sip. Google does have a tendency to buy a lot of technologies, take the technology, and then do either nothing with it or something else with it. Jaiku. Look at that, Kevin, in the chat room with their Jaiku. ProfessorMesser.com/Jaiku. Get you a 404. It doesn't go anywhere. I'm not on Jaiku anymore. But I was back in the day, back when my kids told me to buy Bitcoin. Sorry, that all really did not work out the way I was hoping, as it turns out. Certainly didn't work out the way they were hoping either. But fortunately, we can turn around right now in the after show. Let's not dwell. Let's not go back in time and deal with that. Let's talk about what we can do now. And that is something we can talk about. I want to take you through the idea or the concept here of asking questions of me. And I have one for you. Let's see if I can bring up the view of this. The way that we would make this happen would be to use the link we were using earlier. Don't even have to change the link. Go to professormesser.com/QA and you could submit a question at the top of the screen. The question, as I say here, you can submit questions at any time. We will be moderating questions during the session, so your contribution will not appear immediately. I say it may not appear immediately. I guess there's always a chance. There's not really. It will not appear immediately. I sift through these on this side, and then we will do some questions and be able to make that happen. we have plenty to go through and be able to see what your questions are. You can ask questions about technology. You can ask questions about certifications. You can ask questions about IT. You can ask questions about the weather. I don't care. Ask whatever questions you would like. Sometimes going off script a little bit, going outside the scope of our normal live streams is sometimes pretty good. And there are a couple of these that have come in, and we can break these down and have a perspective of that. Let's go through some of the questions that you have asked. Let's talk about, we talked earlier about CEUs. You know, I didn't give you a CEU question. I didn't give you the instructions for a CEU. So let's do that. We're going to use a question that I had earlier. Like I said, it's live, people. It's been kind of the theme today, hasn't it? Is everything is live? Well, we have, if you've been watching this for continuing education unit credit, I would love to send you an email that guarantees, that tells everyone that indeed you were here to watch a 1 hour of a webinar category CEU, earn that CEU. One of the ways that you can do this is the way that you do this is you must follow these instructions. You go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There is a contact us link at the top or the bottom of the website. Click that link. It will ask you for your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put October 2024 Core 2. And in the body of the message, on a line by itself, I want to put the super secret code words of the month, hardware diagnostic. Hardware diagnostic is the full and complete set of super secret code words of the month. Then if you'd like to put anything else in that message, I do read through every single one of these. You're more than welcome to do so. I enjoy reading through them. I get a lot of these, so I'm not able to send back a personalized response, but know that I did read through every single one of them because I like to do that. So again, the way that you would receive the CEU is you go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click Contact Us, put in your name, your email address. In the subject line, put October 2024 Core 2. And in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, hardware diagnostic. It takes me usually about a week to turn these around and get you back an email, but you will receive a digitally signed email from me, which tells you both that the message really did come from me and that nothing has been changed in that message when you received it. You do, of course, have to validate that with something that's able to read the digital signature, and anything that is compatible with PGP or GPG will be able to check that message if that's something you want to do. That may be outside the scope of what you would want to bother with, but that's why there is an attachment to what I'm sending you. It's the digital signature in that attachment. That is how you can earn a 1 hour webinar category CEU. So let's go through and answer some of the questions you might have about, since we just talked about CEUs, let's talk about the question you might have about CEUs. And we're going to start with this question from Jay, who asks, I do have A+, congratulations, and planning to take Network Plus next year. Assuming I pass Network Plus, there's no assumption. When I pass Network Plus, will the CEUs add up to A+ and extend the validity of my certification? Well, this is one of these interesting situations where CEUs don't even apply. Not that they aren't used, it's just they're not needed. Let's talk about why. Let's go to the CompTIA website, CompTIA.org. Here it is right here. There's that guy. It looks a little bit like Captain America, does it? Okay, and there's a nice lady. There's somebody walking down the street, the tablet. That's me. I'm going to run into something quick. And then there's someone. Okay, so what we want to do is go to the continuing education section here at the top. And it completely hides the stock video, which is great. In here, there's an option to renew with a single activity. Renewing with a single activity. And one of these options, there's a number of options available. Let's compare your renewal options. The one we are most interested in is we can take CompTIA CertMaster CE. That's not what we were trying to do. We could take a higher level non-CompTIA IT certification. That's not what we're trying to do. That's not what Network Plus is. We could pass the latest release of your CompTIA exam. That's the worst option. Why would you just take the exam again? That's not a Smart idea. The question, though, was about taking a higher level CompTIA certification. Taking Network Plus, how does that affect the renewal of A+? Fortunately, CompTIA has this diagram chart thing on the screen, the pyramid of certifications is what that's called. And if we're taking the Network Plus, we can click on the Network Plus. And if you pass your Network Plus exam, notice that it says it fully renews A+. Fully renews A+. What could be easier? There's no CEUs. You don't have to submit anything special to CompTIA. In fact, you don't have to submit anything to CompTIA. You don't have to do anything but pass your exam. CompTIA will automatically see that you already have an A+. They will automatically see that you have passed your Network Plus, and then will move the renewal of your A+ 3 years to that same date as when you passed your Network Plus. So you could take your A+, wait 2 years and 350 days, wait almost 3 years down the line, 2 years and almost a day short of 3 years, and pass your Network Plus, and now you've renewed everything for another 3 years. Now, the reality is they renew it based on that renewal date for that. So keep that in mind. If you took A+ one day, and then the next day you took and passed Network Plus, you're not really giving yourself much of an advantage there. You've just increased the time for A+ by a day. Not much, but at least it's a day. You do get something out of that deal. Not many people are going to take their Network Plus the following day. Now, this applies to other certifications as well. For example, if you have A+ and Network Plus, and you take Security Plus will fully renew the Network Plus and A+. Some of these get a little different. So example, Linux Plus, even though it's higher in the pyramid of certifications than everything else, notice that Linux Plus only fully renews A+. It does not renew Security Plus or Network Plus or DataSys Plus or Data Plus, even though those are listed in the big pyramid of cakey certifications. We're now changing the name a little bit as we go. So make sure you check the individual cert to know exactly what it will be renewing. Notice that Cloud Plus, for example, the older version only renews A+ and Linux Plus. The newer version renews A+, Network Plus, and Linux Plus. So check the documentation. That's the best thing I can tell you. That will be the best way to know whether you're taking something that's going to help you or whether you're taking something that won't help you at all. And then you'll have to find something else to do to renew that certification. Probably take CertMaster CE. CertMaster CE is an online computer-based training program that allows you to effectively renew your certification in a number of hours. So if you're down to the last day and you don't have time to collect CEUs, you could simply do the CertMaster CE, submit that, and you're done. That's probably one of the most simple ways to step through that process. And that's what I would recommend for you as well for doing that. Let's do some more questions. That was a great question. Thank you for submitting it. Let's keep going through this list. One of the questions in the chat room that came up, I thought I might as well discuss it. How in-depth are my A+ free videos compared to the actual exam objectives? My A+ training course is designed to be a full, complete, and accurate training course that matches exactly what you need to know from the exam objectives. Nothing is left out. No extra things are thrown in there that have nothing to do with the exam. It is designed to be a course that you could purchase for an amount of money on a third-party site, or you could just watch it for free on the internet. So that's the real benefit. Instead of me having to charge you to have access to this full and complete A+ course, instead, I'll just make it available on YouTube and you can just watch it there. And people, we've had organizations come up to us and say, stop giving it away for free, put it on our site and people will pay for it. I said, well, why would they need to pay for it when they can get it for free on YouTube? So that's the real difference. My background is in IT and my background is in technical training. So I've got practical experience in the field and practical experience as an IT education person. I don't know what the right term would be for that, but I combine those together to create this. So my goal was to create something that would be worth purchasing, but doesn't cost you anything. I think some people sometimes look at a free course on YouTube and think, well, that can't be any good. It's just a free course somebody threw together. Nay, nay. No. That is not the idea. The idea is, what if we could create a course that's just as good as what you could buy, but you don't have to buy it? So that was the idea from the very beginning, and we continue with that philosophy now 15 years later, more than 15. We're well down the road at this point. But I'm trying to think back of the first A+ we published was the 220 601 series, 601 602. So the 600, 700, 800, 900, 1000. We're on our 6th iteration of the A+ course, and coming up next year, it'll be the 7th. So just every 3 years, you get a new one, and that's the way it's supposed to work. That's the beauty of the internet. And so that's why I believe I will put my course up against anything else you will find out there. Now, of course, there are different courses that teaches different ways. Find the course that works for you. Maybe my course isn't the type of thing you like, or maybe my course works perfectly with the way you like to learn. Fortunately, there's lots of options out there. So find the one that works for you and use that one. I'm not locking you into anything. You should find the thing that makes you learn the best, so that the goal is ultimately to get that certification. We want you to get a job or get a better job. However we can help with that, we want to do that. Let's do some more questions you are submitting. If you'd like to submit a question, use the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and submit your question. While I am looking through these questions, I am very rudely going to bring up my phone very quick, because I did forget in my studio to turn on the air conditioning, and the lights are getting a little warm. And all this equipment running. For those of you that haven't seen the studio before, there's a lot of equipment. There's audio mixers, there's video mixers, there's recording systems down here. There's devices that are just getting hot. There's a lot of heat in here. So that is why I'm turning on the air conditioning just a little bit to keep some of the air going into here. Another good example of how you can use these Internet of Things devices on a different protected VLAN and still have access to them and be able to control them. Got to add the security piece in there as well. Stepping through more questions that you have submitted. Let's go through the list of these. Other folks, here's an interesting one. And it's worth kind of talking about. That's not going to give you the screen that I wanted you to see. There you go. Have you ever been a guest on a podcast or another YouTuber's channel? I haven't. First, what we do here is very niche. There's not a lot of other podcasts that talk about IT certifications, and not a lot of YouTubers out there doing that type of thing. So it's really, first, statistically, it would be unlikely. And then secondly, I just got too much going on, brother. There's a lot of stuff I'm working on. So my day starts very early. I'm usually up before 6 and in the studio, and we're writing, and we're putting content, and we're creating questions, and we're building new courses, and we're writing new books, and we've got other new projects we're working on, and we've got other people that are doing different things. We're coordinating. So there's a lot that we do throughout the day. So I am here in front of this computer all day doing something. So I just don't have time I couldn't imagine being on a podcast somewhere and just hanging out for an hour and talking on a podcast, because I'd be thinking, wait, I got to do some content because I have a live stream tomorrow. That type of thing happens a lot. So nope, not a guest on a podcast or another YouTuber's channel. And nobody's really approached us about that anyway. But even so, I'm not sure that's really that compelling. It'd have to be something a little bit different, I think, for me to catch my eye, for it to interest me at all for something like that. Let's see. Other things that are there. Other ideas and questions that you might have. This is a common question, and one that I think about a lot since I'm the one creating these videos. It's from JL, who says, Professor, I have problems mostly related to command line. Can you discuss a bit on how to remember commands, or how I do it? How do you remember all these commands? There's a lot of commands. Let's bring up the exam objectives, shall we? Let's look at all of the different commands that we need to know to be able to make this happen? Let's look at, see if I can bring up the right screen for the exam objectives. We were just looking at these. So the first section of exam objectives, let's start with the ones that are in section 1.11. Go back over to this. Identify common features and tools of the Linux client/desktop OS. And you can see all these different commands that happen to be here. ls, pwd, mv, cp, rm, chmod. That one sounds familiar. chown. Wait, they're almost the same name. Something's different there. Sudo, apt-get, yum, ip. So you get the idea. They're all listed here. Now, what I like to do in my videos is do a demonstration of each one of these so that you can see someone using each one of these commands. But even better, I'm doing this just at a Linux prompt on a live Linux distribution. I think I just built a VM and I'm running Linux in that VM and I'm bringing it up and we're looking at it. And that means that you could do the same thing and follow along with me. First, it's in a VM, so it doesn't really matter where it is in that VM. And secondly, it's something that you can type yourself. And I think that's an important part of this. Whenever you're trying to learn more about how that process works, I think reading about it is important and useful so you can understand, oh, the chmod command changes the mode, and here's the context, and here's the syntax that's used to be able to run the chmod command. How interesting. And look, it separates them out as the user, the group, and then everyone else. Oh, it uses binary. That's interesting. So you can read all about it. We talked a little bit about that earlier. And then you might want to see someone using it. So we can, like today, you saw a demonstration of what I typed in and what the results were, which is interesting. But there is something about doing the typing yourself. I don't know, I go back to people who are, if you play a musical instrument, you're probably already familiar with this, that at some point, the music just tends to happen itself because now you've practiced it so much that you have this muscle memory that is synchronized with the things that are firing in your brain. And the actual mechanics of playing the piece become second nature. And now you can start working on more of the nuance. Maybe you should be softer in that area. Maybe you should be louder in certain area. Maybe you can change the process or the flow of a particular bar or two in that music. So the same thing I think applies when you're typing. There is a tactile response. There is a physical muscle memory associated with that. And when you type in the yum command and you see the results of the yum command, well, now you're putting together a physical act and seeing a result of that. And it fires or locks in something in your brain. There's a synapse there that gets locked in that if somebody now mentions the yum command to you, somehow back there it's indexed and it goes through that index and you think, oh yeah, I've run that command before. I know exactly what that command looks like and I know what the results will be when you type that command. That's what you want. So use these commands. My best recommendation for you is to use all of the commands that are here. And you can follow along with our videos because I've designed the videos that way so that you can find a file and then follow along with me where you're typing things in to see what results are there and make those happen. What Linux VM should you choose? A fine question in the chat room from Madison. The question is one that is pretty wide open as far as answering. So just find something that's very popular. Go grab Ubuntu. Go grab Mint. Go grab any Linux distribution. Any. Doesn't matter. Now, I'll tell you which one I'm using. If you wanted to see the one I am using, I'm going to bring up my virtual machine. How scary will this be? And we'll see which one I currently have set up to do this. Obviously, I'm running Mac OS. So a lot of the things we were doing on my machine, I have a number of different ones that I'm running here. In fact, I probably would not run the ones that I'm running, but we're going to look at it anyway. These are the virtual machines I'm running in one VM software that I use on my computer. I'm running a Windows 11 here because my primary desktop that you are seeing behind the scenes is Mac OS. So whenever I want to demonstrate something in Windows for you, I'll launch this Windows 11 VM. I also have a test server of our web services that I can run offline so I can test before going into production. You've probably learned that already with the courses that we've done, especially on the Security Plus. Bootcamp, which used to be part of macOS, no longer something that works in the world of their new chipsets, the M1, M2, M3 chipsets. So that Bootcamp no longer compatible on my system, but I can still access the files that I have on the Bootcamp. Bootcamp was a way to reboot your system into Windows and Mac OS. You could boot back and forth. It's actually a fancy virtualization, but it just seemed like you were doing a boot back and forth. And technically, I guess you were, but technically you weren't. I've got Windows 11 here on the Intel side that, again, not compatible, but I marked it as Intel, so I'd understand why that wasn't compatible. I did load up a Debian GNU Linux on here, and I think I did that because I was trying to find a new Linux distribution to run a web server on. So that's why that one is there. And then Kali is a very popular security-focused Linux distribution. Now, if you were going to run Linux on your machine as someone who's trying to learn the Linux piece, I don't know that I would use those necessarily. If I was trying to do this, I would probably go to either one of the more popular ones out there is Ubuntu. We'll have a look at their website. So you can go out there. Latest version is 24.10. That is a very popular distribution of Linux that you could use. There's a bunch that are out there that might be a good choice. If Ubuntu isn't your thing, you want to try something that gives you a little more control of the operating system, because Ubuntu tends to lock a few things down, not a lot. Another popular choice is Mint. I just like it because it sounds fresh. Mint is also a good one to use. And it's very easy to use. If you're looking for a Linux distribution that would be a great desktop replacement, I think Mint would also be another good option for that. So those are things you can try. Both of those are very good distributions. But as I mentioned, it's more important that you just try any of them. Just grab any distribution you can find and see how it works. If you're running it in a VM, the worst thing that's happened is you installed it and you didn't like it. You delete it and you install a different one. Nice thing about Linux, it doesn't take very long to install. And a lot of the installation process these days is relatively automatic. If you don't understand how you want to structure the different partitions, you don't know what file systems you want to put on, you don't have to know any of that. You can tell Linux, you tell me what to do. You figure it out. Do it automatically, and it does it. And it just works. So that's the beauty these days. Modern Linux distributions are just so easy to install. Not like in the old days where you had to know all this stuff. Now you really can just push your button. It does it all. So simple. That's the way to do it. Use Mint, use Ubuntu, or anything else you can get your hands on. And that would be a great choice for installing Linux and getting that muscle memory and going through the process of really locking down those commands. You're effectively creating your own labs. That's the way to do it, is create those labs. I think that's a great way to go through the process. Let's go some more questions. We have some time left, so we'll step through some more of these to be able to break any of these down. Here's a non-IT related question. I always like to do at least one of these. It's from Josh. It says, do you play any video games? If so, do you have a favorite? I have limited time, to say the least these days, to be able to have any off time and do things like that. But I do like, I've been a video gamer since I was a wee chap, since I was a small boy. And so I still play video games. I've got a World of Warcraft subscription. You can pop in there and do something with a group and then pop back out of it and you haven't lost anything. It's one of the slowest leveling processes because I might get an hour a night. I might get 2. That's a crazy day if I get 2 hours at the end of the day for myself. But most of the time, that's what we're doing. I do have an Xbox upstairs, so sometimes we'll hop on the Xbox and hit let's see, the last thing I was doing on Xbox, I was doing Destiny for a long time, and then finally, I think I really do like the older Diablos, and I was doing Diablo 4 for a while, and then sort of faded off of that one. Now we're back to World of Warcraft. So I'm very flighty that way. I need to commit. I need to pick one and stick with it. But when you only do that for an hour a day, maybe, doesn't really help very much. So I try to now find a game that is very rich in content. And then when I show up for an hour, there's always something to do. I never get bored because I never have time to do anything else in that system. So yeah, we do some of that sometimes. Other times I am outside, I'm with the family. We've got other projects going on. We got other things that we're doing. It just takes a lot of time. And I live in Orlando. So there's always something to do in Orlando. The weather is always awesome. There's always an event going on. There's always a park, a theme park you can visit. There's always something. So that's the idea, is all of those. Do I play the classic WoW or the new stuff? No, I started with the classic WoW. I don't have to go backwards. So it's the new stuff. I'm on the new world within, thing within, the evil within, the world of within Warcraft, whatever the new one is, that's the one I'm playing. So that is the something within, the war within. Thank you, chat room. You see how it's an hour a day? You see what happens? It just goes after a while. I bought the original World of Warcraft and installed it when it was active. So that was me. I was in there at the beginning, then dropped off for a while, then came back. It's like the normal story, right? And being able to work through them. Other questions on here. This one we can kind of fill in the blank. This is from Anonymous, who asks, would you consider doing a fill in the blank course? This specific one is an ITIL course, an IT infrastructure library course. And I'm going to kind of steal your question, Anonymous, and kind of fill in the blank. Instead of having ITIL there, put anything else. Put anything, not just anything else, but anything. Put ITIL, put Cisco CCNA, put Amazon AWS, put a Red Hat, you could just start filling in the blanks. Put a Microsoft course in there, put this course in there, put that, any one of these. Now, ITIL is an interesting one. The IT Infrastructure Library is a very tightly controlled training program. They don't let just anyone teach their precious materials unless there is an agreement with ITIL to be able to do that. And given what I've said in the past about the IT Infrastructure Library and how it is being used as certifications in IT today, it's very unlikely they would want me doing that. I don't rank that certification as being extremely useful for people who are on the front lines of IT. Ironically, a lot of the people that are managers, directors, and VPs in the IT world have invoked or pushed that particular certification down to people that are on the front lines. And I don't understand why, because the IT Infrastructure Library by itself contains a very nicely laid out explanation of how to take business challenges and turn them into and work through the technology side of things. It's one of the biggest problems we have in any organization, is how you take what you do as an organization and somehow blend that together with the technology that you use. Let's take, for an example, you're a company that sells hamburgers, food service, restaurants. You have restaurants throughout the country. They're in every state. You've got thousands of them. Now, how does Microsoft Windows have anything to do with that? How does Linux have anything to do with that? How does that help you with your goal of selling more burgers? So obviously there is a connection. There obviously is a way that technology can help with that process and make you more aware of what's going on with the selling of the hamburgers. But how do you do that? That's really what ITIL is about. That's the overarching story of why you would want to learn about that. Now, the question I've always had is, why does somebody in the help desk need to know that? They don't. Why does somebody as a network administrator need to know that at a level of a certification. Obviously, they should have some awareness. They certainly know that they work for a restaurant company, and they certainly understand that the technologies that they're implementing are in the restaurants, and this is what we're doing with them. But do you really need a certification if you're at that level? Now, once you get to the manager level, the director level, the VP level within IT, maybe this would be a good type of certification for them. But that particular organization, ITIL, locks down everything. Very similar to the CEH, where they are very particular about who teaches their precious exam objectives. And I don't find that their objectives are anything too remarkable. It's not like they've solved the problem of our time. They don't have a cure for cancer. It's really how technology and business blend together. Or in the case of CEH, it's about using security technologies to be able to protect your data in your organization. There's nothing unique or interesting about that really, but it is an important set of topics. It's something that would be useful to know, and therefore it does make sense to have a certification there. It just needs to be presented to the right people. So although ITIL by itself does have a niche of people that find that to be valuable, I don't think it's probably rolled out in the best possible way across these organizations. And perhaps as it applies to me and to the answer to your question here, what I consider doing an ITIL course, I don't like the certification and how it's being used today. And secondly, they wouldn't let me do it anyway. So maybe, is that sour grapes? Maybe, I guess if I wanted to, I could present myself to them and say, how could I do this certification? But that seems like an awful lot of work when Microsoft and Amazon and Cisco and Red Hat and a lot of other organizations have certifications that I feel would apply more towards the technologist and have none of those restrictions in place. Plus are probably a little more popular than ITIL. So there's a balancing act with any of these, of course. There's this whole set of processes we go through on this side to figure out what is the next thing going to be for us? What is the next step going to be for us? And how are we going to follow this up with another certification? It probably is not going to be ITIL. It's probably not going to be CEH either. Probably would be one of those others. So if anything else, maybe I was able to answer that question. I just feel like maybe most folks would not like the answer, which is perfectly reasonable too. And I agree with you. It probably is not very useful, what I just was able to tell you all about. Let's now do some more questions that I can dance around on. So let's see, this is a good one. Let's talk about where I travel, shall we? This is from Kevin. It says, have you ever ridden a Brightline train, or is my schedule just too busy, or is it just tourist stuff? For those of you not familiar, if you're in the northeast part of the United States, train travel is just a normal part of your life. There are trains that run between Boston and New York and DC and Philadelphia and Chicago. And it's just a normal part of what you do because we built the train infrastructure up there when we were building out this country. What we don't have in the southern part of the United States is a very well-established passenger train infrastructure. So enter a billionaire who has decided he is going to be the next big person in the world of transportation to introduce train travel to places where it does not exist anywhere. So he is the new Henry Flagler, if you will, of trains in the United States and perhaps in other places as well. And they have built high-speed trains between Miami and Orlando and stops in between. This is a company called Brightline. If you're in the western part of the United States, they're working on a similar Brightline stretch between Los Angeles and Vegas. Brilliant. I'm on Brightline all the time. I ride them multiple times a month because I have things that we do in Miami. So instead of driving 4.5 hours to Miami and fighting the interstate and dealing with the traffic in Miami, I can hop on a Brightline train that goes 110 miles an hour down I-95, and I'm in Miami in 3.5 hours. And I didn't have to drive. I could be on my computer the whole time. There's internet the entire way. It's fast. The train is fast and the internet is fast. The internet is just as fast as the train is. It is really a remarkable thing that they have built there. And unless you're somebody in the Northeast who's done a lot of train travel, you're like, well, of course, that's how trains work. You people in the South, but we're not accustomed to this. We don't have that infrastructure in the South. So it's nice to have it. And it's a lot of fun to be on the train. It's comfortable. They've got power on every seat. You can plug in your laptop, plug in your phones. And when you get off the train, you're comfortable. You're happy. You didn't have to go through driving for 4 hours and very tense on the turnpike and deal with crashes and slowdowns and trying to work around everything. Just hop on the train. They take you and then you hop off. You're done. It's so great. So yeah, I do it all the time. I love Brightline, and I've got another one I need to schedule soon. So maybe I'll see you on the Brightline. Come by and say hello. See that? It follows up. Someone even asked, well, do you get recognized in public? Oh, no. Thankfully, no, there's none of that that's going on. Although it's amazing that we have this community here working with certifications, and we'd love to do these live streams. And of course, being on YouTube does make you somewhat known within the world of technology. And often I will meet people doing a technology thing and go, wait, I know, I've seen the face. I recognize the voice, and we'll talk a little bit about it. But that is the extent of anything I have to worry about being in public. We should do maybe a meetup sometime. I'm in Orlando. We should all just show up at, Disney Springs someday and hang out and talk and just have a good time. That's always a great place to hang out. There's plenty of food and drink and shopping there. Something for everyone. They have chocolate, they have ice cream, they have beer, they have poutine. What else do you need? That's kind of it. You're good at that point. And I didn't even get a chance. We talked yesterday about Happy Thanksgiving for those of you in Canada, and our family in Canada too enjoyed that this past week. So I hope you had a good holiday. And now we're back. Do you just take the whole week? If the Thanksgiving is on a Monday, can't you just take the whole week off? I guess maybe a lot of people take the Friday off and they just make it a 4-day, right? That would make sense. More questions. We got time for more questions. Let's step through a couple of others. This is a timely question and an important question, and one we will address right now from Anonymous, who asks, should I wait for the new A+ CompTIA version next year, 2025, or continue studying the A+ version that was released in 2022? CompTIA tends to update their A+ certifications approximately every 3 years. Really, when they release a version of A+, it's really good for 3.5 years for their retirement date because there's an overlap period. So we would expect CompTIA to release a new edition of their exams, I would say in the April timeframe of 2025. So you're talking 6 months from now, plus more than 6 months away. And then the existing version of the exams will continue to be available until what I think is probably going to be November, December. So another 6 months. So you've got over a year from today to take both of these exams, pass them, and earn your certification. And if you are currently studying for your A+, or you're thinking of studying for A+, that's what you should do, is study the existing current versions because they're the ones that are existing. Now, a lot of people have this argument with me and they'll say, and it's a fine argument, and they say, I'm going to wait because I think the new exam is going to have newer content and I really want to learn the newer content. That's really the only justification I think somebody can have for waiting. That is the only advantage I think you could come up with, is that one minor advantage, because very little, relatively speaking, on the exam is going to be new. There's usually a 20 to 30% change in the exam when they update it. This year, it's going to be a little different. I'll explain why in a moment. There are many more disadvantages to waiting than there are advantages, because what is going to happen, let's take this scenario. There's two of you. One person says, I'm not going to take the current exam. I'm going to wait until April. Then I'm going to study those objectives and take the exam in 2 to 3 to 4 months from then. So summer of next year, July of next year, I will finally be A+ certified. Person next to you says, great, because I'm taking the exam right now. I'm going to be A+ certified by Christmas or just after the new year. And I have 6 months now where I have the certification, you don't. And if we both go for the same job, who's going to get the job? I am. Having that A+ certification in your pocket is much more valuable than waiting for a minimal number of newer topics to show up on an exam that is currently not even existing, doesn't exist yet. So that's why I tell people never, never, never wait to get certified. Never, never, never. The advantages are to getting your cert now far outweigh any advantages you could even think of or come up with down the line. The only people that really need to take the latest version are people that are in the training industry that are required to take the new version so that they can teach the new version and be knowledgeable about it. But here's the interesting part. For those of you wondering, this is probably one of the very few times this has actually not happened in the last 15 years and may not have ever happened in the world of CompTIA certifications, is that 3.5 years ago, when this current version of A+ was released, the 220.11.01 and the 220.11.02, the current Core 1 and Core 2 exams, when it was released, the major operating systems that were available on the market that were shipping were Windows 10 and Windows 11. Today, the major versions of software that you can get for Windows that's currently shipping, well, Windows 10 is certainly out there and still running. It's still usable. It's not shipping anymore, but it's still being used extensively. Windows 10 and Windows 11. So the versions of Windows that are on the new version of the exam are the same version of Windows that are on the old version of the exam. So if you're thinking, I'm going to wait for the next exam so that I get new content, you're not really getting a lot of new content. There's not a lot different in the new version. And I've already done the calculations. We have already built our new course. We're already working on the new course. So I know all about the exam objectives at a very, very, very detailed level. Not a lot has changed in the A+, because in the industry, we had a lot happening over the last 3 years. Don't know if you remember where we were stuck inside for a year. Our entire industry came to a screeching halt. Every industry came to a screeching halt. So we didn't get a new version of Windows. This is not a normal 3-year cycle. This is more like a 2-year cycle. Not much happened. So it's very interesting. So no, you're not going to get Copilot. You're not going to get a lot of ridiculous AI stuff. There's not going to be a lot of that on the exam. There is some new content. Some of it is new. Some of it changed. Some of it's different. There are a couple of things that changed, but it is not like traditional 3-year updates that we have seen in the past. Instead, it is a relatively small number of changes. Half of what you would normally expect has changed on this exam, which makes it much more better. It makes it better for us, because if you are someone currently working on the current versions of the exam, there will be a percentage of you that life happens and something happens. You're not able to get through it, and you're not able to meet the deadline when the exam retires in November of next year. And you're going to wonder, well, where do I need to start over with the new version? Not really. There are a couple things you'll need to know that are different. Not a lot's changed though. Same Windows 10 and Windows 11 that it was 3 years ago, which I think is great. That's pretty good. So there's all of the exam objectives are available on the CompTIA website. You can compare the two today. I think I have a percentage of these that we can look at. I'm not ready quite yet to publish the details of this, but let's see if I can find the numbers real quick. So if I had to find for the new Core 1 and the new Core 2, I'm going to tell you that the percentage of new objectives on these are under 20%. It's even less than that for the Core 1. Core 1, not a lot's changed at all. Core 2 is under 20%. And there are a number of objectives that were thrown out. There's a percentage that are different. So that's good. I think for us, for people that are trying to learn and earn their certifications, it takes a lot of the risk away and the worry away for people that are working towards their certification and worrying about the dates. If you are worrying about the dates, then you don't have to worry anymore. Because if you do have to reset, it's not going to be a huge reset that you have to do. Normally, it's about 30% different. So when I say there's like half difference in these, that's about right. That is about right for those. So I would say, the question that was posed is, should I wait? The answer is you should never wait. But if you do run into a scenario where you do have to transition from one version to the other, it's not going to be a huge issue for you. It's not going to be painful at all. So that part's good. You're in good shape. I know we're at the top of the hour. Let's try to fit one more in to get all of these. Let's talk about timing, since we are on this case of how quickly could we get through this. Martin asks, do you think I could pass the exam, the A+ exam, in 2 months by just watching your videos and studying from the objectives? This is a question that's difficult for me to answer because I don't know what you know. And that is really the deciding factor here, is a couple of different things. There's different variables you have to keep in mind. Some people study faster than other people. They're just able to read and study and gather this detail and remember it better than other people can. I hate them. They're very good at what they do. They've got some type of photographic memory, or they're able to take these very complex concepts and they're able to remember them very well. I always feel like it's a struggle for me to do that. But some people are able to do it very easily. We also have people that have maybe been working in the industry for a while. You may have already been working as a technologist. You may have already been on a help desk. You may have already worked as a workstation administrator or server administrator. So a lot of the topics on the A+ may already be very familiar to you. Maybe you've built your own computers before. You already know about operating systems and motherboards and plugging in expansion cards and plugging in the power supply and what the connectors look like. You're already familiar with that. You just needed something to put it into a very specific learning package so that you can take the exam. So if that's the case, you might be able to increase the speed of your studies, and it may be that you are able to finish an exam very quickly. I would say the average for most people to take a Core 1 exam is 2 to 3 months, and the average to take a Core 2 exam is also 2 to 3 months. So on average, it's 4 to 6 months to complete both of those exams on average, which means some of us will take longer than that. Some of us will take much shorter than that. And it probably is pretty close to a very common distribution. And in fact, there are people, if you've already been in the industry, some people read over the exam objectives, look at a couple of videos, and in a week, they go take their exam and they pass it. No problem, because they're already familiar with the concepts. There are other people that have not in IT. They have no familiarity with a computer. They've never looked on the inside of a computer before. They're effectively learning all of this from scratch, and maybe they have a limited amount of time. Maybe they have an hour or two at the end of the day. Instead of playing video games, they're going to study for a certification. And that's what they do. Well, that might take a little bit longer because you have limited study time, you have limited experience, and that might increase the total amount of time it takes to study for these exams. So could you pass both exams in 2 months by just watching the videos and going to the course notes and going through the questions? You could. Some people do. But I think your best bet is to combine a good book, good videos, good hands-on, and good Q&A, and step through every exam objective and test yourself on each objective to see if you really know it. Use that set of exam objectives as a master checklist. Just go through it. Check, 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 check. Nope, don't know that one. Check, check, check. Don't know that one. And now you have a list of things to study. I think that is the best thing you can do, to go through every single one of them and be really familiar with anything that could be asked of you on the exam. I think that's one of the best things you can do. These exams are not simple. They are comprehensive. There's a lot of different topics. There are questions that really have you pull from different parts of the exam to put it all together into one single answer. They're not, it's not a cakewalk. It's not a trivia test. It's something where you really do have to think about what's being asked and come up with the most appropriate response for that question. And I think that throws a number of people that are used to taking exams in college that are very trivial, where they ask, what does the abbreviation DC stand for? You know, instead of knowing that's direct current, wrote it in 100%. The A+ exam is not like that. It poses and asks the question in ways that makes you think. It's a couple step process to finally get to the final answer. You have to know more than one thing to be able to answer anything on that exam. And I think if we work through and understand what the exam is presenting to us, and we really know the topics, we really understand the technology behind those exam objectives, I think they can ask the questions however they want, and I think you'll be able to get them right. But it takes quite a bit of time to step through all of them and understand all of the exam objectives. Stick to the objectives. I think that is your best and most efficient way to determine if you are really ready to take the exams. And I think that's what you should do. Study for a week, see how far you get, and then you should be able to extrapolate that out for all of the exam objectives. Maybe in a week you get through an entire domain and you can think, well, I'll be done with this in a month or two. Or maybe in a week you get through one section of one domain. And then you can say, well, this is going to take 6 months. This is going to take 9 months. This is going to take longer than I thought. But that would at least give you a barometer that you can use to determine how long should I really expect this to go. And there may be ways to speed things up. You may be able to go to the Professor Messer Discord, talk with other people there that are already studying for their A+, go into a study room there. You can create ad hoc study rooms on the Discord, or even join some ad hoc Discords that other people create, step through questions, watch videos together, ask questions of each other. There's often people in there that know different things, so you can ask questions of other people, things that they know, things that other people have seen, and really combine all of your knowledge into one single study group, all on the internet, all on the Discord. Just another way that you can think of doing that. If you want to join our Discord, it's professormesser.com/Discord. It's a great way to do it. You can also go to the Professor Messer website, and there's a Discord link in the upper right-hand corner. You'll see all of the little social media icons at the top. It's a great way to do it. Well, I think that is a great place to finish up our Core 2 conversation today. Hopefully, you were able to get something out of the questions that we did in our first hour. Those performance-based questions are always a challenge. And of course, we have an archive of those available on our website. You can go back in time and look at all of the videos that we've ever created. There's new questions every month, and you can step through all of our replays and maybe learn something a little different about other technologies that we covered in previous study groups. We have study groups all the time. We'd love you to come back next week. We have our Security Plus study group on Wednesday of next week. If you're ever wondering when the next live event is going to be, you can check our calendar at professormesser.com/calendar. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for being part of this community. Thank you for participating in our live stream. We look forward to seeing you over on the Discord when we are done here. We look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks for joining us. See you next time on the A+ study group. Thanks, everybody.